wants him in the games until he dies playing. Acknowledge.
Acknowledge. Master Control.
End of line.
When you mention retro video games, depending on the generation you're in, different systems come to mind. But in all honesty, when you say retro video games, the Atari 2600 usually pops into people's minds. Released in 1977 and originally called the Atari VCS or Video Computer System, it's really the system that launched the gaming industry and created what we enjoy today. Yes, there was the Magnavox Odyssey and the Fairchild Channel F that came before it, but it wasn't until the Atari 2600 was released with its home arcade ports that really brought the industry to where it is today. And because of that, a lot of people want to still play the Atari 2600. Now, there are a few ways you can play your Atari 2600 today. You can buy an original unit, which most console purists, that'll be the only way they would go, or you could buy one of the inexpensive Atari Flashback consoles. The advantages are the Atari Flashback consoles do include a number of games built in, but is it really worth it over buying an original Atari 2600? Now, although I am and a lot of other people do believe that original hardware is still the best way to experience these games, these Flashback consoles do have some advantages, price being one of them. Original hardware, controllers, power supplies, and game cartridges these days have gotten very expensive. Sometimes, yes, you do get lucky, but usually the prices have gone up exponentially over the past few years. An Atari Flashback console can maybe cost $39 brand new for the latest and greatest one, but they generally drop in price relatively quickly, and sometimes you get them in bargain bins for $10, and then it's a pretty good deal. They also come with controllers. They're also in great condition. The older consoles hardware can be 30 or 40 years old, and they're prone to failure, so unless you know how to fix it, you might be out of luck if it breaks down. Another advantage is they already come with tons of great games built in. Now, sometimes these Flashbacks emulation is not the best, but they have gotten slightly better, and I think that the Flashback 7 I'm about to show today, the emulation had gotten a little bit better, and the sound has gotten a little bit better. I know with the Sega Genesis Flashbacks, they do allow you to have a cartridge you can put in and play the original games, but there are some errors with it, with colors, and definitely the audio, at least on the Sega consoles. The Atari doesn't have too much sound effects, so it's a little bit harder for it to screw up the audio, and from what I heard today, they've gotten pretty good, at least with the Atari versions of the Flashbacks. Now, only the Atari Flashback number 2 allows you to hack it, if you will, and put a cartridge connector in there, because that's basically a clone of the original hardware. The Flashback 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are basically an NES-on-a-chip, so it's emulation. Now, supposedly there is going to be a Atari Flashback 7 handheld. I wasn't able to get that today, but maybe we can get that another time. But for now, here are the specifications supposedly for the new Atari Flashback console that should be coming out sometime in October. As you can see here, I do have quite the little collection of the Flashback consoles in my gaming collection, and this is what I saw today at my local Toys R Us, which they quickly pulled off the shelves as I went to the counter to purchase this little device, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. But at least you can see the front cover of the Flashback showing the new game Frogger added, and a quick photograph of all the games on the back of the Atari Flashback number 7. Now, if you look at the older Flashbacks, the Flashback 5 came with 92 games, Flashback 6 100 games, and the 7 101 games. So between the Atari 6 and 7, they've only added technically one game, Frogger. Is it worth upgrading if you already have a Flashback 6 or 5? Let's find out. Okay, so I just came from my local Toys R Us. Today is September 20th, 2016. And I always go in there to see if anything new kind of shows up once in a while. And sure enough, today I walked in and I saw the Atari Flashback Classic Game Console number 7. And as you already saw, I do have all the, well, not all the other ones, but quite a few of the other Atari Flashbacks. Now, I don't buy them necessarily for the gameplay, because these are NES-on-a-chip kind of knockoffs. But it's kind of nostalgia for me. I mean, I grew up with the Atari 2600 and the Magnavox Odyssey 1 and so forth. So I started collecting them then. Once you start collecting a couple, you have to have all in the set, right? So these are not supposed to be released yet. My understanding is not till like the first week of October. So again, I saw this at the Toys R Us, and I picked it up, and I went right to the cash register. Now, they didn't have the portable, and that was a kind of a bummer, because I looked all over, and they did not have the supposed Atari Flashback 7 portable. And supposedly the portable does have an SD card slot to add more ROMs to it. Now, no one knows for sure if it's still this kind of NES-on-a-chip for that handheld, or if it's actually more like the Flashback 2, where they've kind of re-implemented some of the hardware on there. But in any case, I don't have it. So I brought this up to the cash register, and the girl was like, "Oh my God, 7's out." She was surprised herself. Goes to ring it up, and the cash register says, "Cannot be sold." She says, "Hold on, I have a problem. It says it can't be sold yet." I'm like, okay. She tried to put it in a couple more times, kept saying can't be sold. So she called over a manager. The manager came up to me and goes, "Yeah, these can't be sold yet." I said, "Well, you have them all on the shelf there, so I would like to purchase it." It's like, "Well, I can't sell it to you, but if you like, I can hold on to it till October 1st. I said, "No. You have it on the shelf. I'm at the cash register. I want to buy it." Now, as I'm saying this, employees are going over to the area where the flashbacks were, and they were pulling all the other Flashback 7s off their shelf. And I said, "I need to speak to a manager." She said, "Well, I'm a manager." I said, "Well, I would like to purchase this, please." And she again said she couldn't. So at that point, another manager walked over and said, "What's going on?" And we explained the whole situation, and that manager put some code in, allowed it to accept the purchase price, and here I have the Atari Flashback number 7. Now this one, as you can see, does include Frogger, and I'm not sure if these are all the new games yet. I really haven't been following it too much. I kind of buy them as I see them. Usually I buy these well after they've been out for a while and they've been discounted quite a bit. I actually got this one for $34, which is, again, a lot of money for what these things actually are. But getting one of the first ones available, I thought that was a pretty good deal. So let's just kind of take a look what's inside. I'm not expected to be surprised in any way, shape, or form. It's probably going to be a typical Flashback, but let's take a look inside the box. And it's a nice box. I always still try to make sure I get a box that's in good condition. I guess we'll take a look at the back real quick. I had some photographs before, but let's try and get a close-up here. And there's supposed to be, I guess, 101 games on here. I'm not sure if, I don't think they're all obviously listed on the back here, but we'll just go over them real quick anyway. Sorry for any harsh lighting I have down here. I had to run down into the basement because my son's playing Minecraft with a friend, a very good friend, and they're very loud, and I didn't want to get them in the recording. So we have all these games listed here, and of course, new edition of Parker Brothers Frogger, and many more. So let's turn this thing back over here, and let's open up this box. There we go. And it's a typical Atari Flashback box, and a typical little black and white manual that tells you how to set up the console, and tells you information about the games themselves in case there's anything special you need to know about it. It does come with the, they're okay. These are the wireless controllers. The Atari Flashback 1 and 2, I think up to the 3, had wired controllers, which is definitely better than these wireless ones. But in a pinch, you know, these will work. And the Atari Flashback is compatible with the original Atari joysticks and paddles. Now, I'm not sure if the Flashback here supports a paddle controller, because a lot of times the paddle games are set up now to work with the joystick, which kind of sucks. But we got one joystick there. We have this is the RF and video. It's not RF, I'm sorry, the component audio and video. A little 5-volt power pack that comes with all these Flashbacks here. They're pretty interchangeable. And the primary joystick here that has not only your fire button, and, you know, the button feels good. The joystick has a positive feel to it, but the RF, or sorry, the infrared that they use just kind of sucks. If you're not direct line of sight, it's not going to work. But if you keep it line of sight, it works okay. And then you have your buttons here for resetting. Oops, I'm dropping it. You have your reset button, your select and start, and of course your on-off power button. And then we have the actual console itself, which is a typical Atari Flashback console. Very light, feels like there's nothing in it at all. your 2 controller ports, and no way to tell it's a 7 anywhere on the console. So we just have to assume that this is in fact a Flashback 7. But we'll power this on and we'll take a look at some of the games in the menu. Okay everybody, I have my Flashback set up down in my theater room, and I thought I'd give it a try down here for a change. So let's get the big screen going, and we'll take a look at the Atari Flashback number 7. Now, all the Flashbacks are pretty much based, at least the Atari ones, are based on an NES-on-a-chip, except for Atari Flashback number 2 and the 2 Plus. The 2 and the 2 Plus were actually manufactured by what was left of Atari, I suppose, to remake, basically in hardware, the Atari 2600. That's the only one where you can actually hack an original Atari 2600 cartridge connector. There's actually instructions on the internet, I'll link that down below, where you can add that. But what do you say we dim the lights and take a look at the Atari Flashback number 7. Now we can see here, I'm going to go through the 11 pages of games that are listed here. I am using the infrared remote control joystick that comes with the Flashback 7. Again, the joystick itself feels okay, but just the infrared part means you really have to be very close. I'm probably right now about 10 feet away, and direct line of sight. Now we're on the second page, and I'm just going to move the cursor up so you can see that one you can't see every time I flip the page. So I'll move up here so you can just see the other game. I'm going to go to the third page. And we're going to go to the fourth page. And now the fifth page. Now the sixth page. And the seventh page. And now the eighth page. And the ninth page. The 10th page. And we'll go to the 11th page now. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to try and go through, I guess, some games that may or may not have been reviewed. Again, there's 101 games on here, and a lot of them are rehashes from every other Atari Flashback that's been put out there. One of the new games is Frogger, so let's try and take a look and see how Frogger turned out here on the Atari Flashback number 7. And there's Frogger. Let's get down to it here. Again, with new batteries, I want to go over this way. With new batteries and direct line of sight, the controller here is okay. The feel is okay. A little spongy, but not too bad. And let's give Frogger a try. As far as visually, it looks pretty good. Now, I'm going to have to admit, I've never owned Frogger on the Atari 2600 to compare it to the original. To be honest, this looks almost like the arcade port. But I could be wrong. Again, I have not played the Parker Brothers rendition of Frogger on the 2600. But just visually looking at it, it looks pretty rich, and it's really reminding me of the arcade classic itself. If it is, some of the sounds are a little bit different, but that seems to be the norm for these flashbacks. The weakest part is always in the emulation being the sound. But the joystick itself, again, pretty responsive, being wireless, as long as you keep it pointed at the console. And if this is in fact the arcade version of Frogger, which I'm really starting to continue to lean towards that it is a version of that, they did the same thing with the Space Invaders. They did not include the Atari 2600 port of Space Invaders, but they actually gave you the Taito arcade version of Space Invaders, which again is not horrible, but when you buy something called an Atari Flashback, you're going to want to have the Atari version of it. That's your nostalgia. Again, this is pretty good. I mean, I'm kind of happy having, arcade Frogger, which I'm, again, pretty confident that that's what this is and not the 2600 port. But, I would have liked, for sure, the Parker Brothers version. Game over. So let's take a look at some other games that came on the Atari Flashback, number 7. Now, again, I mentioned Space Invaders, and I'm wondering if they kept the arcade version of Space Invaders on here, or if they, in fact, ported the Atari 2600 version. Let's take a look. They do show the box art for the Atari 2600 Space Invaders. And nope, it is still the arcade game. Which again is not horrible, because I always, as a kid, wanted the arcade Space Invaders, and we got the 2600 port. But in honesty, the Atari 2600 port of Space Invaders was pretty awesome. There was so many levels, so many different things to do in that game versus just what you get here. So far, it's the arcade version of Space Invaders, and it looks like the arcade port of Frogger on the Atari Flashback 7, and not, in fact, the Atari 2600 ports. Another thing we're going to try out later is I'm going to hook up a couple of paddles and see if it does work with the paddle games, or is it just joysticks that work with it. Let's take a look at some other games that might be on here. Let's see. Missile Command. That should hopefully be the Atari 2600 port, and in fact it is. The sound was a little bit off. Not horribly so. So, a fairly good rendition of an emulated Atari 2600 on an NES-on-a-chip for the Missile Command, which is the same exact missile command you would have gotten on all the other Atari Flashbacks as well. So we're going to play Super Breakout with a joystick, which to me is sacrilege. It's impossible. I'm going to get a paddle, and I'm going to see if this can work with a paddle, because you cannot play Breakout with a joystick. I'm sorry, this is absolute sacrilege. So I've hooked up an original pair of Atari paddles, and the paddles do, in fact, work. So if you don't want to use a joystick, which you really shouldn't for any paddle games, and you have a pair of paddles, as you can see, the left and right motion does work on the paddles, which is a good thing. So let's take a look at some of the other games for the Atari Flashback. Okay, here's what looks like a homebrew title from, I think it's from Good Deal Games, as a matter of fact. And there it is. So it is Good Deal Games. And basically it reminds me of the arcade game Ripoff. This UFO is coming in to try and steal blocks, and you're trying to shoot it to stop it from taking the blocks away. It's a very simple game. It's fun for a few minutes, I suppose, but it's definitely not something I'd say I'd buy a Flashback 7 to play. Here's another, I believe, homebrew called Save Mary. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't read the instruction manual, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing here. So, again, not something I would have went out to say, okay, I'm going to buy Flashback 7 to play Save Mary. Now, I would like to add, I do know someone named Mary who I definitely would save, but if it's in this type of game, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. Here's another game on the Flashback called Polaris, and I kind of thought it was like the TRS-80 color computer version of Polaris, which was a Missile Command clone, a great Missile Command clone. This game is not that. You do have submarines. You're trying to shoot bombers out of the air who are dropping mines down to blow up your submarine. It was very challenging, and it was kind of fun. I did enjoy it, but again, I don't know if I would have bought a Flashback 7 just to play this particular game. So far, there's really nothing new on this console saying, I've already got other Flashbacks, I'm going to go and run out and get this because I have to play this game. It's not the case. Now here's a game I've seen before on a couple of the old classic consoles. I believe I have a version of it on my Fairchild Channel F. And basically it's a very simple game. Basically there are blocks going around the screen. You must avoid them. It starts off with one block and then 2 blocks, 3 and so forth. And the object is simply not to get hit. It sounds easier than it is because the joystick is not the most fluent thing on these consoles. But again, it's challenging. But once again, not something that I would say, you know what, I have to play this game. I have to buy a Flashback 7. Here's another title. I believe it's a homebrew called Off the Wall. Again, the Flashback 7 does come with an instruction manual. I haven't looked through it yet, so I had absolutely no idea what I was doing here. So I can't say if this is good or bad, but again, not something I would have said I gotta buy a Flashback 7 to play this particular game. Nice opening intro music on Double Dunk. Again, an okay game. I believe this is on the other Flashbacks as well. So again, not a reason to run out and buy Flashback 7 if you have an older Flashback, or you can find one cheaper. Crystal Castle's another good game on the Atari 2600, but again, this version is on the other versions of the Atari Flashback, so it's not a reason again to run out and purchase a Flashback 7. Now, one of my favorite games, Asteroids, in the home and arcade. And as you can see, the visuals are pretty good, the controls are pretty good, the sound effects are pretty good. They got pretty accurate with it. So the NES-on-a-chip emulation is getting better with AtGames. And a good advantage is that these are component out. You're getting good composite audio and video, where on a real Atari it's RF unless you modify it. So that's one plus in the Flashback Pocket. But again, this is on the other versions of the Flashback. You don't need a 7 to play this game. Okay, here's Atari Climber, and again, it's an okay game. I honestly don't know if this is a released game or a homebrew. I believe it's a homebrew, and it's an okay game. But if I'm not mistaken, this is also on one of the other Flashbacks as well. But again, this is not something that's saying, you know what, I have to run out and get a Flashback 7 to play this game. So what's my final verdict on the Atari Flashback 7? Well, if I had no other versions of a Flashback or access to a real Atari console, it's not a bad deal. You get 101 games, 2 joysticks, and a console you can plug in through component for better video and audio quality. And there are a lot of fun games on here. There are some garbageware as well, but overall, not too bad. Now with saying that, I would probably instead buy a Flashback 5, 6, or 4, much cheaper. You can get it for $5 or $6 sometimes, and you'll probably get just as much fun out of it. There's no real incentive, if you even have a Flashback, to upgrade to a 7. I don't think that AtGames gave you enough value to spend the money to buy a 7 if you have an older Flashback console. If you don't have one already, okay. I think they dropped the ball. I really think they should have stuck with Atari's Flashback 2 and have the option at least of a cartridge port on there and using real hardware versus an NES-on-a-chip. But of course it's their call. I personally think the Flashback 7 is not worth the purchase price unless you simply want to collect it or you don't have a Flashback and want to just try it out. Now if you don't want to buy a Flashback, you still have options. You still could buy a real Atari 2600 or one of its clones like the Coleco Gemini, and you can have lots of fun with it. Yes, they're older consoles, so there's age to kind of contend with, but these older machines are also pretty robust. And you can mod them for better video output. There are actually component and even S-video outputs for the Atari systems. And then all you need to do is simply add yourself an Atari Harmony cartridge. The beautiful thing about this cartridge is you can load not only all the original Atari games or homebrew games, but there are also hacks. Like there's a great hack of Atari Pac-Man called Pac-Man 8K, which is phenomenal. And that's something you simply cannot play on an Atari Flashback because there's no way to load any games other than what comes with them. So this is where original hardware comes into play. Another better option than a Flashback 7, in my opinion, would be to track down a Flashback 2 or a Flashback 2 Plus. Now these were actually designed by an Atari engineer to recreate the original Atari 2600 hardware. Now it's still not 100% compatible. It's very close. Some games still won't work, but at least you can modify it to put a real Atari 2600 cartridge edge connector on it. Now it doesn't come with it. You'd have to modify it yourself. But in doing so, you will have the audio and video component out, which is improved over the original Atari 2600, and it can play almost all the 2600 games. There are a few that do not work, even with the Harmony cartridge. Some simply do not work, but it's still a better option to being limited to the library that the Flashback 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 1 give you. So it is an option. Again, I think it's a better option than purchasing the Flashback 7.